Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us to today's Let's Talk Healthcare session from the School of Professional Studies here at Brown University. We run these lessons in leadership sessions as part of Brown's mission to make an impact around the world and globe as far as bringing education, knowledge, wisdom to the wider Brown community, the wider Rhode Island community, New England, US and beyond. So thank you for joining us so much tonight. Tonight's topic is influencing without authority, understanding power in politics, and it's targeted somewhat to the clinical arena, but also is true for many of us in our leadership roles, in that we have the need to get things done and influence folks without necessarily direct line authority to accomplish those things. So I think this is a really relevant and important topic to think about in terms of how we use our own ability to think about and persuade folks to kind of get done what needs to get done. So I'm joined tonight by Ruchin Kansal. Thank you so much for joining us, Ruchin. Ruchin is a visiting professor of the practice here at the Brown University School of Professional Studies. He's a professor of the practice at Seton Hall, where he teaches professional, graduate, and undergraduate leadership and management courses. He's also the founder of Kansal and Company and advises companies on growth strategy and innovation and solves the most pressing corporate leadership challenges. Prior to his academic appointments, Ruchin spent 20 plus years in the life sciences industry, most recently serving as the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Strategy for Digital Services at Siemens Healthineers, which is pretty fun sounding title. I like that. So, welcome, Ruchin, and thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sandy, for having me, and thank you everyone for taking time this evening to join us. It's really a privilege to be able to spend time with all of you, and thank you for your time. I come to you today as a healthcare leader, but more importantly, as a husband to a physician for the last 27 years, and have had a view into a life of a physician from that perspective. Also, father to an aspiring physician, an academic in leadership, but most importantly, as a patient and as a consumer of healthcare. And as a consumer of healthcare, I've seen my experience evolve over the last 25 years. And I can say I am really rooting for more physicians to be taking leadership roles in healthcare, because I think it's going to be good for me. And that's what brings me here today. It brings me here today because I want to talk to you about why, as physicians, you should be investing in your own development around business, around leadership, around technology. Why that is going to be good for us as patients. But it's not a journey that can end in a masterclass. My goal today really is to tease some topics, give you a flavor, and get you going on this journey. And that's what my goal is. But before I delve further into the topic, it's always good to understand why you are here and what would you like to get out of this. So if you can open the mic, if you can hear from some of you around why you decided to spend your evening with us and what are some of the things you're looking to get out of this session today. And Sandy here and Bryce is working with us in the back end. They'll be able to help us really, get your comments. But yeah, please feel free to speak up or type in the chat as to what you expect to get out of today. It's a very shy crowd this evening.
I think it's probably best to dive in.
All right, Sandy, given we have no takers, we'll dive in. Let me start with the why, right? I'm going to present a few numbers here. The first number is 4 out of 5. So why are we here today? Why you should be here today, and why you should be really listening? 4 out of 5, that is the number of physicians today that are employees of hospitals. If I think of 20 years ago, if you think of 20 years ago, 2 out of 5, maybe 1 out of 5 were employees of hospitals. You were private practitioners. That's how you were trained to practice. That's how you practiced. And by the way, that was good. You were playing the game of tennis. But now you are employed and you're playing a different game. You're playing a game where you're practicing as part of a large organization. Second number, which is even more interesting, 10 for 1. What does that mean? That means that for every one physician out there today in an organization, in a hospital system, there are 10 administrators. So not only your practice has changed from being an individual practitioner who was an expert sitting across the table from the patient, you're now employed by a large organization where for each of your physician friend, a physician colleague, you have 10 administrators you also have to work with. And so the complexity of your job has drastically increased, right? You are not just an expert sitting across the table now. You are an expert sitting in a large organization that still has to deliver their role of taking care of patients, but working in this interdisciplinary team. And that's where we hear from a lot of physicians, the burnout, it's not what it used to be, et cetera, et cetera. My view on that is, the game has changed. The game has changed. Rather than lamenting that the game has changed, prepare for the game and play it better. And for that, I strongly believe that if we can really append physicians who are super smart and super capable in providing care, if we can append their learning with business, technology, and leadership acumen, it can only be good for them. It can be only good for their own growth and their own sanity. But most importantly, it will only be good for the patients, because then the business decisions that are made in hospital settings will be informed by medical expertise, not just numbers. And that is why I think for more physicians to stepping into leadership roles is a good thing for all of us patients. And with that, what I want to talk about today is a little bit of leadership, right? And if some of you attended my last masterclass on EQ, PQ, and IQ, we talked a lot about effective leadership. We'll dive deeper into some nuances today. But just to recap, let me ask again and try my luck one more time. What do you think is leadership? If any takers, anyone wants to talk to me about what is their view of what is leadership? Sandy, you're muted.
We have one guest who says, I have an interest in starting a patient-centered eating disorder treatment center within my organization, which can address the increasing need in a broad socioeconomically diverse population. So I think that speaks to how to navigate leadership within the context of probably a very complex organization.
Absolutely. And to be able to do that, you will certainly need a lot of these leadership skills we're going to talk about today. But let me just ask the question again. What do you think is leadership? When you think of the word leadership, one word that comes to mind. You can type it in the chat box if you would like.
Julie says the ability to clearly articulate a vision toward collective benefit and galvanize a team towards that.
Wonderful.
Very good.
Anybody else?
Being able to discuss your ideas and being able to influence.
Absolutely. Both are correct. Leadership is really about influencing. Leading is influencing. Those are the two sides of the coin. What do leaders do? They influence. They influence to achieve a goal. They influence to achieve an aspiration. They influence to achieve something that needs to be achieved. But really, leading is influencing. Leading is really getting people to get behind you. And so the other part of leading is following. You can't really be leading if there's no following. So if you want to be a leader, you need to be cognizant of two things. One, that you're doing it because you want to be influencing something, because otherwise why lead? Because it's a 24/7 job and it's a really tough job. But if you want to be leading, that means you want to be influencing some outcome. And for that, you need to build a following. Now, we did talk about last time that effective leaders who are able to influence and have a following have a good combination of IQ, EQ, and PQ. IQ being their cognitive ability, and in case of physicians, we did say all of you, have very, very, very strong cognitive ability. That's why you are where you are. So we don't have to worry about that. But it's the EQ and PQ pieces that really can transition people from being people to leaders. And those EQ is really your ability to manage your emotions and relate to others while managing your emotions. And PQ is again influence. And that is what makes an effective leader. And again, that's good at a high level, but then how do you really make it tactical in an organizational setting? And that is what we are going to try to answer today. To do that, we really have to do a deep dive into two concepts. If we are part of an organization and if you want to be a leader, an effective leader in that organization, and if you really want to influence decisions, like starting this clinic, and that one of our participants talked about, we need to, one, understand the power structure of the organization, because that helps us really understand what kind of power we need to have to be able to influence a group or a person. Number two, we need to understand the political climate of the organization, because unless we understand the political climate of an organization, it is very difficult for us to influence it. So those are two really key tactical concepts as we look at an organization that are important to understand, because they drive our ability again to influence, aka lead. A lot of us, when we join an organization, we focus on the job we have to do. We don't step back and understand the power and politics, which actually are a bigger determinant of our happiness and our sanity and even our success. And then therefore, I would behoove you to really think about these things, not constantly, not 24/7, but maybe an hour a week as to where you work, what is the power structure, what's the political structure, so you can be a little bit more effective in what you do. So let's do a deeper dive and talk about power. And by the way, please feel free to stop me and ask questions as I go along. I love more interaction than just speaking, so I would welcome that. Let's talk about power then. What is power, and where does it come from, and how do you really, make sense of it? So first thing to really understand about power is that power comes from dependence on someone for something. So power comes from dependence on someone for something. If there is no dependence, if you remove dependence, there is no power. So what can that something be? That something can be something that someone thinks is very important and you may hold it. You may hold the keys to someone's life, and that is importance. It comes from scarcity. There are not enough of doctors out there. There is shortage, and therefore that gives you power. It also comes from non-substitutability. Can someone do the job that you do? I mean, there's a lot of talk about AI replacing physicians. I am not betting on that yet. But given the scarcity, there is this idea of substitutes that need to be thought of. However, if you really think of yourself as physicians, you do have a lot of power in an organization, because you control the resources that are important to me as a patient. You can treat me, you're in short supply, and you're non-substitutable. And for the same reasons, you are in power positions for the hospital systems you work at. So that's number one, right? Number two, the sources of power or the basis of power, right? So that is the power that you have because of the resource that you are. But then there are other bases of power in organizations. One is personal power, right? Are you considered an expert in what you do? And you are the expert everyone goes to when there is a challenge with an eating disorder or with a cancer patient, with an emergency trauma situation. Expertise brings a lot of personal power. Are you the expert, right? Then there is referent power. You're so good, you're so well respected that people want to be in your circle. They want to be known as someone who is affiliated with you, right? Good leaders tend to have a lot of referent power, right? I'm in this circle, I'm part of this circle, I'm part of this network. And then that's, your personality and your aura and, your presence in a room, in a setting, in the hospital that can drive a lot of referent power. And think of people around you who have that kind of power that come across that way. But that's one basis of power, the personal power that resides in you. It's your expertise and your personality. Now, this stays with you, but at the same time, expertise is replaceable, right? So don't get too comfortable in just personal power, because even though you may be very powerful because of your expertise and because of your personality today, it can change very fast. Then comes the position power, right? And then the position power, there are three aspects to it. One is legitimate, which is you are the chief medical officer, you are the director, you are the chair, you are X in an organization. So you sit in a chair that comes with certain powers affiliated with the chair. Now, those powers could also be reward power. You could reward someone for doing a good job. You may be in the way of someone's bonus. Or it could be coercive. You could fire a person. You could take punitive action. And these are all positional powers. These are all legitimate reward and coercive powers. Now, the thing about position power also is it's temporary. The power sits in the chair you sit in, not in you. A lot of people, including me, when I was in chief strategy officer, chief innovation officer roles, we become a little too carried away by the fact that we are that person now and the power vests in us. The reality is that power vests in the chair you sit in. Till the time you occupy that chair, you have that power. Once you don't occupy that chair, you don't have that power. So again, don't get very enamored by those titles and those roles, because those are the powers of the chair, not the powers of you. But it is very, very important to have those power positions to be able to move organizations to action. So important, but don't get enamored. And then the last one is the network power. And what I mean by network power is, one, in an organization, there are people who hold information. And these are information brokers. So think of people in your environment, people who you always have to go to seek information. Because, they hold this information, they tend to have power. And then the other way of looking at network is connections. How connected someone is in an organization, in a network, because the network can really help drive a lot of things. The network can really help break barriers. The network can really help get things done because that's how influence really works. Now, what I would say is the network power of the three that are on your personal position in the network is the most important, takes the most time to curate, but if you curate it well, gives you a lot of staying power, both internally in the organization, but also externally, if you ever have to go out. So those are the bases of power. So we said one, power comes from dependence on someone for a source, which all of you have. And then in an organization, you also have to think of, your own personal power, the position power that you hold, and the network power that you can really leverage, because those drive your ability to drive influence. And coming back to the network, right? How do you really build your network power in an organization? The first rule of strengthening your network power is understanding the informal communication channels. All of us are very adept at understanding the formal communication channels. Very few of us really think of the informal communication channels. But if you can really understand what those informal communication channels are and become part of that communication network, you have network power. Second thing is, in your organization, identify information brokers, people who people always go to get information, because they sit in nodes in this network where they control information flow and therefore have a lot of power. And if you're affiliated with them, you have power, because now you get to understand the organization from a very different perspective, from a very internal perspective. Number three, develop deep relationships. I mean, a lot of us are pressed for time and we don't take the time to develop relationships at work. That matters a lot. That matters a lot. It's not the quantity of relationships, it's the quality of relationships. It's the friendships that you develop at work. Because those friendships, you are a friend of a friend who's friend of another friend, another friend, and another friend. And over time, that friend circle becomes the informal network that really drives the organization. So taking time to develop deep relationships and friendships is something that you should really strive for. Invest in your personality, right? We talked about personal power coming from your personality. It's very easy, right? How you show up, how do you deal with people, how do you communicate with people, how do you treat people? Do you know the name of the person who picks up your trash can at the end of the day? Those are all things that really build your personality. And once you build that and invest in building that personality, that gives you a lot of power in the network, because now you are known as a person who's engaged, as a person who invests, and as a person who people look up to. And then, like I said, think of network not just as an internal construct. It's equally important to think of your network as an external construct. Conferences you go to, physicians that you know, people you know in other organizations, because, hey, when COVID hit, you did not solve for everything just by talking to physicians in your group, right? You had to pick up the phone and call people. People who can pick up the phone and call people to get information, a lot of network power. So really invest in building not only your internal, but your external network, because your value increases with the value of your network and the people you know. And then a few other things about power before I close. Number one, power by itself is not good or bad. How it is used is. So you could be in power position, so always be careful how you use the power when you are in those positions. You can use it to reward, you can use it in a coercive fashion. Using it for reward and influencing and inspiring is a good thing. Using it to drive your own agenda and burn out people is not a good thing. So if you're in power positions and if you aspire to be, think about how you want to use it. And if you use it well, it's only going to give you back manifold. If you use it badly, it will come back and bite you. I can say that from experience. The other thing is that powerlessness is a bad thing. So imagine people in your organization who feel powerless, who feel like they can't just do anything, they don't have a voice, they just have to be silent participants. They are the people looking to leave. And if you are a person trying to build and lead an organization and you have people who feel powerless with one step out of the door, that's a bad thing. So not only do you need to understand how you can use power well, you also need to understand that you don't make people feel powerless so that they decide to leave you, especially good people. Also know that power elicits two kinds of reactions: conformity and resistance. Conformity in terms of compliance is okay, commitment is good, because commitment means, yes, we can work together and work better for everyone's good. Resistance, dysfunctional is bad, where it is like, I just won't listen to you. But constructive in terms of, hey, you are not doing it right, but maybe we can do it better this way, is a good thing. So again, think of what kind of response you want to elicit. Commitment and constructive is a good thing to strive for. We have all heard too much power corrupts. It is true. It is very true. So when you get power, don't let it go to your head. Very difficult. I wish you all that power. When you get it, don't let it go to your head. And then lastly, power does not have to be a zero-sum game. For you to be in power does not mean that there can't be other people who can also be in power. In fact, if you are willing to share power, it can only lead to increased influence, because now you have built a network of people that are in power positions that can really help you influence and drive decisions in an organization. So that's power. I know it was, very quick overview of concepts of power, but again, just know that one, you do have a lot of power. Two, if you can really understand the power structure of the organizations you work in, you can be even better at your jobs as physicians, physician leaders, influencers of better care. And that can only be good for us as patients. Let me pause and see if you have any questions here before I jump into politics. All right, so jumping into politics. So understanding power structures helps us understand who's in power positions and how they can influence, or how you can be in those power positions to influence a group or a person. Politics, basically the political structure of the organization, and understanding that helps you pick up the tactics to influence decisions and gather resources that you need. So what do I mean by that? What is political structure or political climate of an organization? Before I jump into that, last time we talked about political skill as an ability to effectively understand others and to use this understanding to influence others, right? So it's really about understanding and then influencing. And in an organization, it becomes very important, because politics does not happen in a vacuum. Politics needs an organization for it to work and for it to be able to influence, right? You can't think of politics in a person of one. You have to think of politics in a group of 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 or 100. You have to think of politics in context of families, in workplaces, in nations, in global settings, etc. So the idea of politics always happens when there are more than a couple of people involved. And in organizations, the way you understand these political climates are just by observing and listening, right? One is, what do people really say about the political nature of the organization? It's highly political. Oh, it's very apolitical. Oh, it's such a pleasure to work with this, really no politics. I've never seen an organization that has no politics, but some tend to be a little bit more political than others. But just listening to people as to what they say about the political nature of the organization can give you a very good idea. Second way to understand the political climate is workarounds. Does the work happen straight line throughput process, or there are a lot of workarounds? You can just, go around someone, or you can twist someone's ear, or, shake a hand and get things done. More political organizations have a lot more workarounds, less political organizations, less workarounds. So a very good way to sense if a place is political or not, how many workarounds exist. The less, the better. The other thing about political climate is it can be perceived by different people as very different, based on their position, based on their personal power. So same organization can be seen as political by one or political by another. And therefore, you also need to be very aware of how you are looking at it and where are you coming from, because that really will drive how you act. And then lastly, politics can be a good thing if it is used to drive organizational interest. It can be a bad thing if it is used to drive personal self-interest. So you also have to see how is politics used in an organization to drive the organization forward or to drive a person forward? If it is being used to drive a person forward, be wary and really understand, if that's the place you want it. But understanding politics is important because that then helps us figure out how we influence people to drive the decisions that we want. For example, again, one of our participants who wants to open this, Center for Excellence for Eating Disorders. Some of the tactics that are possible, right? I'll go through these and then we'll discuss a little bit on, what are some of the best ones. Legitimacy. I'm in this position, I can make this decision, so I tell you, do this, right? That's an influencing tactic. Comes with position. Rational persuasion. I have the data that if we do this, it helps add $X to the bottom line and improve patient lives by X%, and. That's rational persuasion. Hey, I have the data to support what I'm saying. You should really listen to me, and then we should do this. Consultation. I have this idea. What do you think? How can we make it better? By doing that, you're now building partnership, building coalition, building, more energy behind your idea. Exchange. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Does it happen? All the time. But it's an influence tactic. In some organizations, political ones, could be a very good tactic. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Inspirational appeals. I have a vision. If we do this, we can achieve this. Hey, won't the world be so much better if we could do it this way? That's inspirational appeal. A lot of very good leaders do a very, very good job at this. In my mind, any CEO should be very, very good at inspiring. Very good influencing tactic. Inspirational appeals work. Personal appeals. Hey, friend, you are my friend. Let's do it. Please do it for me, right? You are my friend. Please do it for me. That's a personal appeal. Ingratiation. Ingratiation is, oh man, you are so good. So almost false praise, and then, hey, can you please help me do this? Does it happen? Yes. Do people fall for that? Yes. Coalitions. You form your coalitions, your groups, and you use almost coercive power to move decisions in your favor. Coalitions are an influence tactic. You'll see organizations where there are groups of 2 or 3 or 4 people that will always band together, and there'll be someone else in front of you, very different, behind your back, and they are the power brokers who are really, doing things in the background and influencing decisions in their favor. And the last one is pressure, right? It's kind of positional, but if you don't do this, I will fire you. Hopefully it doesn't happen a lot anymore, but it still does happen. So that's a very, very quick view of influence tactics, right? And based on the politics of an organization, some of these work, some don't. But let me ask you this, based on what I just said, which one of these listed here do you think are the top 3 influencing tactics that work the most universally? Any idea? Any thoughts on that? Again, legitimacy is positional, rational persuasion is data-based, consultation is what do you think? Exchange is you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Inspirational is I have a vision. Personal is hey friend. Integration is you're so good, and then can you do this? Coalition is those groups that work in the background. And pressure is do this or. Any ideas on number 1, number 2, number 3? All right.
Do you mean number 1, 2, and 3 in terms of things that
Work
can be successful?
Yeah. Which of these influence tactics work the best in organizations? Universally, which might be the top 3?
Well, if I had to pick 3, I'd say rational persuasion, consultation, and inspirational appeals.
You got it. Rational persuasion, that's the best tactic that's used most of the time. Consultation, number 2. Surprisingly, exchange is number 3, not inspiration. People work with people, and people like to do people favors and return favors. And across organizations, exchange is another very, very good influence tactic that works. So if you are looking to influence an organization that is moderately political, rational persuasion, consultation, and exchange are 3 effective techniques. However, if the organization is highly political, the bottom 3 come to play a lot more. You'll see a lot more ingratiation. You'll see a lot more coalition forming. You'll see a lot more pressure tactics being used. Once you walk in an organization and you experience it, you will know what kind of influencing tactics are being used. If you see ingratiation, coalition, and pressure, either adapt or know that it'll be difficult for you to navigate that kind of a political climate. A lot of times, just knowing the climate you're operating in and what you can and cannot do is also a good outcome. Then last question on influencing. If you were to influence someone who is more senior to you, upward influence, which one of these do you think would work best? You're trying to influence someone who's senior to you. In the case of our friend who's trying to open up a clinic inside this hospital, which one of these techniques, tactics do you think will be most effective when you're trying to influence upward?
Rational.
Got it. That is the safest and the best influence tactic to use when you're trying to influence upward. And that rational persuasion is not just facts and data, it is telling a story and telling and really bringing the person into being part of the outcome, right? So there is a lot of rational persuasion, but then there's a little bit of inspirational selling and a little bit of influencing, but it is really rational persuasion. Downward on the other side, rational works, but position, legitimacy of your position works very well. Inspiration works very well. Hey, if we did this, we can make a difference. And you know what? Ingratiation works a lot of times. Sadly, it does. Just making people feel good, flattery, sometimes does the trick. I would not ask you or in any way recommend you to use ingratiation as a tactic, but literature says, experience says, ingratiation, flattery works. So all else apart, trying to influence downward, if you have to use flattery, don't be shy about it. Now, lateral influence, where you're trying to influence your peers, that is the most complex. And almost every strategy we talked about, every tactic we talked about can work there. Rational persuasion works, right? Hey, we are both, oncologists, and we have to drive this treatment, and this is what the data says, so let's do it. Consultation works. Hey, what do you think? Because then you're bringing the person into a decision, and now it's a collective decision. Exchange sometimes works. Do this for me today, I'll do something for you tomorrow. Personal appeals, I'm in trouble, friend, help me, works. Flattery, again, works. Legitimacy in lateral influence could work sometimes in matrix organizations, and more on that next time. And then sadly, coalitions work a lot. When you are looking for lateral influence, being part of a coalition in an organization can be a healthy thing if used productively and not to bring people down. But these are all the tools. There are not many other tools that are out there, right? If you can really understand these tools and begin to practice and master these, you are 80% there in terms of your ability to influence decisions and on your journey to be a leader. So when we started today, we said leading is influencing. And to become an effective leader, one, understand the power structure. And in that context, identify your own sources of power. What kind of power do you hold? Personal, positional, and or network. All three are important. And really invest in diversifying and enriching them. There is value in investing in the power structures and being part of the power structure to be able to influence and be a leader. When it comes to politics, number one, understand the political climate. Ask questions, look for workarounds. Think about information brokers, how information flows, right? And then based on that, match your influencing tactic to the politics. If it is a very rational, straight process organization, rational will work very well. If it is not, maybe you have to resort to coalitions. You will have to match the tactic to the politics of the place. Both are important. Most important, strengthen your networks. I've learned this lesson late. I learned this the hard way. But the power that stays with you forever is your network power. Not your personal power, not your position power, your network power. I give my students, undergrad students, the challenge that start building a network today and know that your network has really a powerful network when you can get a meeting with the president of the US. Now, not all of them will get there, but it's a good benchmark to have. And you won't get there by seeking quantity, you'll get there by seeking quality of your network. And that is very, very important as well, right? So understand power, understand politics. But if anything you take from the session today, take this away. Invest in building and strengthening your network. That will help you the most in your role as a leader and an influencer, and even an influencer without authority. So my call to you, be a leader. It's good for me as the patient, because I trust that if you are in leadership positions making healthcare decisions, they will not only be business driven, they will be patient driven. And that's what I want to see from my healthcare. So please step up, be a leader, and to get there, assess and strengthen your EQ and PQ. There are many tools out there that you can use to assess and build your EQ and PQ. Hogan, EQI, political skills inventory, Clifton strengths, coaching, etc. I mean, I can tell you, I was in leadership roles in healthcare for 20 years. I did not learn enough about leadership in those roles till I got to be in the academy, when I really started to study leadership and understood the importance of these things. So if you really strive to be, want to be a leader, take some time, invest in yourself, assess yourself. It's not rocket science. You have very, very high cognitive ability. You can do this. Do it. Again, do it because it can only make the healthcare system better. It can make patient lives better. It can make your lives a lot better, a lot more satisfying, and really healthy for everyone. So that's my appeal to you. And with that, I'm going to pause and hand it over to Sandy, and then we can take questions.
Thanks so much, Ruchin. That was very inspirational at the end. I really appreciated that. And one of the other ways that you could think about furthering your career and your skills, and particularly around leadership, and develop those skills is through leadership programs at Brown. We have a number of them, Leader as Coach, a number of different areas where you can learn about persuasion and communication. But in particular, I want to talk about the Master of Science in Healthcare Leadership. It's a one-year program to lead to a full master's degree. We do that over 3 semesters, and we ask you to come in person for 3 residential sessions. in Providence, where you get to meet your classmates and faculty in person, and the rest happens online, and people continue to work professionally as they complete the degree, participate in all the commencement traditions here at Brown, like the Van Wickle Gates that are shown here. And we have two enrollment options. You can start in the summer. We have a class here of about 30 students in the classroom this week, enjoying their very first session here at Brown, or in the fall, so in the September semester. And it's again 1 year to a full degree. So it's a little highlight of leadership opportunities and leadership education here at Brown, and specific to healthcare.
Thank you, Sandy. And with that, we can open up for more questions.
So while we're doing that, we can, Bryce, if we're ready, we could also open up a poll. We have a quick poll for you. Would appreciate your feedback about this session and future opportunities that we might run for lessons in leadership sessions.
Perfect. Well, I just launched that poll, so that should be showing up for everybody. I do see some people responding now, so thank you.
We're also happy to spend a few minutes answering questions. So thoughts about or discussion about the great information that Ruchin shared would be very much welcome. Getting lots of thank yous in the chat, so that's appreciated.
Thank you.
Well, here's a great question. How do you form coalitions?
Like I said, politics is a people business, and coalitions form over time when people start to relate with people at a friend level, and when that friendship becomes a closed cluster of, we are and nobody else is inside the circle, and we are going to do things that really benefit this circle of friends in every way possible. So the thing about coalition is it doesn't form in a day. It takes time. It takes a group of people who stick together over time for a long period of time, but then start to do things that start to work in their favor and realize that their coalition has a power of influencing things a certain way, and then that becomes stronger. So yeah, I mean, if you're entering an organization today and want to be part of a coalition, it'll be an uphill battle unless you are willing to get in and be hazed, like, you do the things that you need to do to be accepted into the circle, and then maybe you'll be part of that coalition. But yeah, that's the thing about coalition. It takes time, and it takes friendships. It takes some successes in getting things done, and then it's snowball effect after that.
Great. So we've got some other questions as well. First, we'll go to Erin. She asks, do you recommend focusing on PQ, becoming familiar with our organizations, or increasing our credentials as early career physicians? So that's an interesting question about earlier in your clinical career. How do you balance focusing on both?
Yeah, so this is how I would think about it, right? Your credentials give you the license to practice, and therefore there's no substitute for that. You have to, right? And depending on what kind of practice you want to be and what kind of medicine you want to be in, those credentials are table stakes. There's no compromise on that. That said, if you do only that, you will be a very good specialist and a very good physician. You may not succeed as a leader. So if you have any aspirations to be in leadership roles, in management roles, I would say along with that table stakes of high competence, and very, very high competence, by the way, because I want to be treated by a physician who's 100% correct, not 99.9% correct. So 100% competence, but please also do invest the time in EQ and PQ. And like I said, EQ is your emotions, your personality, right? And it can be developed. There are a lot of easy ways of understanding and then building on your personality. Actually, at Seton Hall, the Leadership Institute that I have run for 4 years, we bring in freshmen and give them, a baseline on their EQ, and then do the EQ after 4 years upon their graduation, and we have seen an increase of almost 10%. So EQ can be developed. Same thing goes for PQ, right? Once you understand what it is, you won't develop it in a day, but if you're aware, you can develop it over time. So in my view, EQ and PQ are constant learning and the differentiators. And then, you have your life to learn and to become better at those. I'm still learning. I'm not 100%. No one ever will be. But being aware as to what it is and how you can build it is a good thing. Hopefully I've answered that question.
I thought you did great. All right, so there's a question from Gonzalo. He is a physician who's joining us this fall, so he's already been accepted to the MHL program.
Wonderful.
He asks about the personality of physicians and the importance of knowing yourself relative to the types of influencing strategies that you use.
Yeah. So when we talked about EQ, PQ, and IQ last time, what we said is IQ is your cognitive ability. What EQ is self-awareness, interpersonal skills, and problem-solving skills, at its very core. And then PQ really is this idea of, influencing based on, how you show up with your personality and your cognitive ability. I would say that and I'm sorry, I missed the question. I just have a brain fog there. And the question was?
So in terms of knowing your kind of your own strengths about how you go about influencing, does that shape the strategies that you use in influencing?
Right. So, if you know your personality and your political quotient, you kind of know what you're good at and what you're not so good at. And both are very important to know, right? What you're good at is important to know because if you can harness that strength and invest in building that strength, you become better, and that becomes your tactic. It's also important to know what you're not good at, because a lot of times what you are good at may not work. And therefore, knowing what way to ask for help is equally important. So I would say both your strengths and your blind spots are very important to understand, because that will make you an effective person in a situation, because then you will know which tool set to really use, what you know, or some help, dial a friend, help that you may need. But yeah, I mean, knowing self is the first step, and really knowing self in a very objective and an honest way, and not rejecting what some of these assessments tell you about you is the right first step.
All right, and we have time for one more question, and we have another question from Sammy, who is a recent graduate of the MHL program, and if I can brag about him, he's a cardiologist from Alaska. So thanks for joining all the way from Alaska. He asks, how do you drive change if the authority or CEO is mainly focused only on sort of business driven, like the bottom line, is it going to be profitable, versus population health, quality realms, expertise, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so number one, become the CEO, right? And then you can that way. And number two, the thing about driving change is that unless there are a core set of people who buy into the idea of change as a good thing, nobody wants change. As human beings, we are change averse species. We don't like change. There are some of us who want change, but majority of us don't want change. And then therefore, if the CEO is totally business driven and you are thinking population health and, better healthcare for all, et cetera, it goes back to number one, the why, which is the rational influencing tactic, right? We should do this because it helps business in X, Y, and Z way. The CEO wants to be all about business. How does population health management help the business? Make a rational persuasion. Number one. Number two, can you build a relationship or know someone in the network who can be that voice to the CEO, who can really help bring him or her in a consultative fashion as to what should we do differently to really thrive our hospital system and make it better for the future. So that tactic works as well. I would say try those two first, and then others can follow. But this is really about upward influence, so rational, and building a network of people who can really be those consultative partners are the two best approaches. But really, you will have to tell the story in terms of how it is good for the business, because that's what the CEO is doing.
All right, thank you. Bryce, is the poll still open? And if you haven't answered that, we'd appreciate you answering that for us.
Yeah, we got 100% participation here, so that looks
terrific. Thank you so much for that feedback. We really appreciate it. As Sammy could attest to, we pay attention to feedback here at Brown. So we're very excited that you all joined us today for our Lessons in Leadership session at Let's Talk Healthcare. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks so much to Ruchin for joining us tonight. And we look forward to future sessions on leadership in the coming weeks and months. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.